51. Last night, Kevin and I had an epiphany that we should share our new thing, which I'll explain in a minute. So we're going to do that. And then Tuesday is New Year's Eve. So I feel like we should do a wrap-up kind of early drinking thing on that day. So we'll make 52. Whether Ben endorses that or not. So quickly, I want to plug something brand new that we've just created literally in the last couple of weeks. It's a job board. It's going to be more than a job board. It's going to be a local, high-quality extension of this room. Not extending to Virginia or to Maine, but really Wilmington, Kennett, Exton, Malvern, the people who, a little bit into Philly maybe, this is the people who come through here. They've been asking us, a lot of people say, hey Chris, do you know somebody who can do that? Or companies say, I'm looking for somebody to do this. So instead of spending a lot of time in my inbox answering those questions, we're going to do this. And part of it honestly was finding an awesome WordPress job board that I knew I could implement in like 4 hours. But the other piece that made this kind of a reality is this guy, PJ Volosky, who is the founder of the Goshen Group, a tech recruiting firm 2 blocks away. And he approached me, over the summer, and we had coffee. And he really kind of struck me as a local guy, focused on quality relationships, helping the area. And so that night I saw Engine Theme's job WordPress thing, and then I bounced over to PJ's face, and then I was thinking about the space in my inbox. I thought, let's just do this and see how it goes. And so we have 23 jobs on there and a couple of freelance positions, and we're going to be doing some content that reflects or that digs into what's going on in the area, the economy, tech trends, what employers are doing. I've got some interviews lined up with the CTO of Pipeline Deals and a senior big data developer at IMS Health to ask them what's going on in trends. Got some students in the back from Westchester that'll love reading that stuff, I hope. Stuff from PJ about how to attract talent and build culture, because there's literally fierce competition for developers right now. It's pretty crazy. So we just issued a press release. We're going to be doing
the press release was just covered by News 4 in Columbus, Ohio. So pretty big deal.
Nice. Big deal.
That sounds like a big deal.
Well, there's a Westchester in Ohio. Maybe it's
probably.
Open up an office there. So I really want to thank you for giving us a chance and partnering with us and really committing to a short run to build this and maybe a long-term partnership. It's really an extension of the community. So if you have time to check it out, let us know what you think. And if you have needs, we've already talked to Unisys and CTDI. There's a lot of companies that like the idea of partnering with somebody local. I haven't looked for a job in a while, but when I was doing some research, your Monsters, your Dice, it's very database driven. There's no humans behind it, but we're behind it, and PJ's behind it, and PJ's team. This is Alex from Goshen Group 2. So if you have any questions for any of us, let us know. We added the Goshen Group as a sponsor. We are really pushing this week, right before Christmas. So expect a lot through the new year. And can anybody just click on one job so we can see? Let's do web developer. That's a freebie. Freelance. So, basic job listing, but we're going to be piping in content on the side, and any of this is shareable and it's mobile friendly. So we're going to reach out to Dinneman and the university and let everybody know. So that's our big news for today. Thanks for letting me have the floor for a couple minutes. So excited for this. I'm personally excited for this starter meetup because I'm a content kind of person. I think a couple of years ago I wrote a blog called Web 4.0, and it was about content, like good content. So I'm excited to see what your product's doing. Next week, I said we're gonna actually cover this. So we'll give you an update what happens in 1 week. We'll go through it, and we'll have cookies from Carlino's. A little bit of a festive thing. It won't take the whole hour, but tomorrow night is Night Owls. Do we have a demo tomorrow night?
No demo.
No demo. So Night Owls is normally no demo. We've just been throwing them in here and there. It's from 7 to 10, and if you want to come and hang out and chat with designers, developers, creative people, come over. We're always here. We've been here every Wednesday since January. What else, Ben?
Did we talk about all of our sponsors?
Oh, no, thank you. So I also want to give big props to the I2N. Jim Lochner is here as a rep for those folks. It's an extension of the CCDC, Chester County Economic Development Council. They really helped us financially and just networking. They're great. You should really make contact with them. Even in some odd, it's not just, Economic Development Council services. Mary Frances McGarity, a senior person at the Economic Development Council, ran into someone, told him about the lab. He runs a office furniture store, and he came over and he said, I want to donate some, furniture, some really high-tech looking furniture. And I was like, sure, that's awesome, for free. So you never know where relationships are gonna bring you. And also, Fox Rothschild, Terry's in the house. Terry Kerwin, he and Fox have supported our wild ideas and preventing us from kind of ending up in the gutter. So thank you for that support and insight and guidance. And Terry and Ray Sarnacki, an advisor at the lab, Ray, both doing their first office hours. So that's pretty cool. Office Hours is a program that we run to connect innovators with domain experts in legal, tech, real estate, whatever. You can go to officehours.walnutstreetlabs.com for that. So, any indie film night news? Jesse, is Jesse here?
She's not. She's finishing her grades.
Okay, we had indie film night last Thursday with Kyle Hudson, who shared his film cover, and we had probably 50 people, a band in here. We had a keg of beer still. It's probably warm, but help yourself. I think we're probably doing one in mid-January, so I think I should stop talking and make room for Michael.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Let's just welcome Michael.
Let's welcome Michael.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, I had started several businesses over the last 10 years, and basically I moved to Philly about 10 years ago. I grew up all over the U.S., kind of looked around from California originally, and kind of looked across the whole country looking to see where I'd like to start a business. And I visited Philly a few times and really liked what was going on here. I saw a lot of potential in the region, and started two businesses initially. Shimamoto Sound was a recording studio, and then Tech Philly was like a web and IT consulting company. And, in the beginning, things were tough. I mean, as with starting any business, it's something that's not easy. There's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes made. And kind of explored just the various options and learning things. Like one thing I learned, big with the business is recording studio, very high overhead. And, not really a growth industry overall. Versus, IT and web consulting, essentially you can start with very little overhead. There's not necessarily, started originally no storefront, just doing on-site consulting, and tended to be like it was a great time to do that around 2003. There was a lot of openings, and so it was just a matter of kind of exploring those things and learning along the way. And so in developing that system, like I kind of like the recording studio basically didn't go as well. It was one of those things like returns just were not there. There was a lot of trouble. There was a lot of other complications, and so really it was more just consulting like IT and web stuff that is where I started to see growth and start putting energy into. And along the way, I just kind of picked up, kind of the skill set you have to as an entrepreneur. You can't just do one thing well. You need to figure out lots of things, or build a team. And early on, like doing it, like I was just doing the single founder of a company, and so originally, like marketing, like SEO was the best way to do it. Like not having a large marketing budget, SEO was a great way to do it back in the day. Started consulting with lots of different companies and learning from that process as well. Seeing like small mom and pop, like photographers and small companies in Philly versus also large enterprise clients, where I'd done a lot of work for stuff like across the entire spectrum, and kind of seeing how these different operations work and learning from all those different people that I'm interacting with, was really how I learned to do what I did. It's not something I think that you can learn. There's some great entrepreneurial programs now. I think they're out there, like Drexel's doing some cool stuff now. But in general, a lot of this stuff, I think there's nothing better than just getting out there and actually interacting with successful people doing things they care about and doing it well. And so like some of the work like on one end of the spectrum was like for ShopRite, their company, they do like 15 billion in revenue a year and have like 70,000 employees. And working with them, like it's just a totally different scale, versus a small company, and just understanding how those systems work and what you're dealing with if you're dealing with clients that are that large, and as far as the proposal process, and it's a much longer time frame to have anything happen, and just kind of understanding of where things fit into it. And then I also did a lot with websites and experimenting with growing websites. It becomes a problem. Like if you have a small site, it's very cheap. There's a little low overhead, but once you start growing, once you start hitting tens of thousands a month, hundreds of thousands a month, you start running into scaling issues. And so that's a real learning process to figure out like not only how to make that happen, how to get that traffic, but then also how to keep the site up, how to keep it running, have everything backed up so that the business can continue to grow. And so it's all those challenges I learned over the year, and and it was kind of as you see over time, these things change. There's different fads that come and go. Like SEO is one of the big things now. That's like what I'm kind of doing now with Boxter. We're seeing, the return on SEO is kind of really changing. And that's stuff like content marketing, which I've been doing for many years. Like I started my first blog back in like 2006, I think. It's back in the heyday. Like I don't know if you guys remember like Dig. Back in the day, it was like a big social news site, like before Reddit and all the other ones took off. And it's about Slashdot. And about how do you get traffic. I was focused on the tech space mostly, and so it's kind of knowing where these things are coming from and how to do it without what are sustainable traffic and growing a business without relying on advertising or huge marketing budgets. And so other things too, just out of necessity, like doing like UX and UI design, which is really important. And basically just kind of putting it all together and like being able to make sure it stays profitable is important. And so that's kind of like the unique skill sets I learned over that time, like working for other people and other businesses. Like I was doing other stuff, but fairly lean and small stuff. Like consulting is great in that capacity. It's something that allows you to scale up and really, learn from other people as long, as you specialize in various things. And so, yeah, it's kind of the lessons I've learned, quickly, because it's either you learn them or you go out of business. And it's, basically like number one, be profitable. And the easiest way to stay profitable in starting off is just keeping the overhead low. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes you see of companies that that do fail. It's just the sense it's like if they're a startup, it's the burn rate. They're not having money coming in. They can't get the investment, and so it's just it's not going to be around for very long if that's the case. And just focusing on what's working. Instead of like saying being stubborn and stuck on one vision from the beginning, like adapt, look and see what is actually working, and that's what I kind of would experiment, try new things, and see what would work, and kind of like go based on what is actually working instead of fighting it. And yeah, get rid of bad clients. That's a big one. Like a lot of times, who you're working for, the companies you're dealing with, can be a net loss, even if they're paying you, versus someone else. They can just hold you back. That's something that can really stop growth, and it's something that people, you don't really realize it until sometimes, it's too late. That someone, looking at the big picture. And so, yeah, like that's, something that just takes time. I don't know. It's hard to know who is a good client and who is a bad client. And it depends on the line of work, what you're doing, and but it can be something small. It's often like if you're doing a freemium service, it could be the free users. It could just be, a drain on overall on the systems and demanding features that you don't need to be building. versus focusing on someone that is paying you and maybe, listen to them, as far as makes sense for the business. And so there's no hard, and fast rules for these kinds of things. I think it's just going to vary really depending on what you're doing. But overall too, and then just a good investment, just building a strong reputation on what you're doing, because at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, I think that's really all you have on your own. I mean, you have your company as a reputation, but then you personally need to build that capital on its own. And with my company, one of the best things that happened with me, the second year into Tech Philly, we won a Best Affiliate Award from Philadelphia Magazine, and still being a tiny company and having that award, that was one of the big things that put us on the map. That really helped. After that, kind of having that kind of social proof, and that's just based purely on word of mouth. At that time, we'd still done no advertising, no nothing. It's just, we had clients that really liked what we're doing, and we're happy to share it with other people. And it's able to grow a business and make it sustainable based purely on that. And so I think that's the key, is just really getting to know your customers and building those relationships so those things happen. And then just networking with other people around you, other businesses that are doing things, to find something that's helpful to each other, where you can support other businesses and find ways of networking and just building a support network that'll help you through those ups and downs as you're growing and learning. Because at different stages of businesses, you're going to need to know different people and different talents. And so, although this led to a few years ago, I'd done many websites, probably 50 or 60 websites over the years experimenting. Type things. Some of them, a good number of them became profitable, but never really took off per se. I would say Simple Post was really kind of the first one where I took a step back and said, to do something, I want to do something big. And instead of something small, niche site, based on traffic, I was I want to, look around at all the problems I'm seeing as far as with websites. And the first version, actually, it didn't really start at that grand of a plan. It's something that kind of took had to get some steam going first and kind of flesh it out. But the initial thing that jump-started it before we even thought it was a company was just a simple problem. My girlfriend is an artist, and she needed a portfolio website. She's totally non-technical. I'm very technical. I could, making a website for her is no problem. But for me to make, I could give her a WordPress site, and then she, would not know what to do with it. She would, hate it. She'd been dabbling in WordPress a little bit, and she could blog, enough, but it wasn't going to help her career. As an artist, you need to have an amazing portfolio site, and you need full creative control over it. You can't just have a blog. You need something that's really professional, and she didn't have the budget to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do something really amazing on her own. So I was what can I do? Something that just be simple, that would give her for creative control, but then it's not going to be a job for me then to manage. I'm managing enough websites. I don't want to hold it against her that I'm helping her, every time she has a question or every time this gets hacked or, there's just a million things that go wrong with it. And so I was what if, I just did a really lightweight system that allowed her to just, add content, do simple design, nothing too fancy. The first version was really dead simple. But as I was building that, and which was a fun project, and then passed it off, and she loved it. And I started thinking more and more about the problems, why is that? Why can't I just give someone a WordPress site? It's a common problem. Someone come up to me and say, hey, I want a website. And I'd be friend, I'd like to help you out. That's a commitment. If you, a lot of these websites, if you set someone up with it, that's just, they're going to be calling you for the rest of your life that's existing, and supporting that. And it's for friends and family, that just doesn't work very well. You can do it as a business thing, but then it's well, you need to charge a fair rate. And it's just something there wasn't anything in between. And so, and then dealing with issues like scaling, security, there's all kinds of issues as far as websites. Drupal and WordPress are the big ones, which I've done a lot of stuff with. And they're great. They're really amazing tools. You can do very powerful things with them. But as a startup, they eventually fall over. It becomes to the point where it's just going to be it's going to be problematic. You can hire someone to do it. You need someone basically full-time to be running your website if you really want to do it properly. And it's just constantly the security updates. You never know when day. So it's a matter you kind of have to be a system admin / whatever, or pay a service to do it. There's plenty of services now that are popping up to meet this need, which is good. WP Engine does a great job. And so there are more options nowadays, but they still, at the end of the day, there's problems to be solved here. And I saw that same thing with content posting. And so what was the idea? Is what if you rethought the entire UX UI paradigm of the system, so they just made it easier to post content and just make it more pleasurable experience, and that you could do it from any device. So the idea was to build up a UI that's fully responsive, the entire admin interface is responsive, just so that you can, if you want to update your website from your phone, you can just do that. And it's been really well. So that was several years ago, and that was a lot of development. The whole thing was built from scratch, So it doesn't rely on anything else. It has its own technology stack. And really does everything from soup to nuts. It's hosting, has like a development server, staging, deployment, full thing, supports like CDNs. And that's one of the big issues we see with websites. Is nowadays like scaling. Like you can pay for more expensive hosting, but it's hard to ease into that. Versus with SimplePost, it supports CDNs like Amazon CloudFront. So if you have a website that is getting very little traffic, you'd use that and it will be like super fast. But say you get 1 million people one day, something happens. You get in the front page of some major thing, you get a lot of traffic, and basically with a CDN you can instantly scale. Other websites essentially have reliance on database. SimplePost, on the other hand, is built, there is no database. The entire system, it's like bring your own database. If you want to do a custom app or something that needs a database, you can add that on, but it's not a prerequisite. And so it just has some interesting technology like that that really solves these problems. And it's been really great. Like, it's been growing really fast. We use it and see it kind of as like a rapid prototyping. It enables us to do apps as well very quickly. For someone like that wants to do an MVP, we're able to do something in SimplePost much faster. It's kind of the real awesome thing. And so as a developer, I really enjoyed working. It's basically just building my own tool set to use. And now I don't rely on any other systems. Basically, I have full control over the entire stack.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's still running.
Yeah. So SimplePost is still going. And then though, as is with life goes, you start new problems come up. You solve one problem. This solved a lot of technical and scaling issues. But then the issue nowadays is just standing out online. Like, so great, you can do a website very quickly, very cheaply, it can scale very quickly, but the thing is, like, so can everyone else. That's really just not that much of an advantage. Like, there's just a million sites. And if you look at the stats, it's just ridiculous, like how much content is out there. Like, how many people are online? I mean, there's like amazing traffic that you can get, but the problem is you're competing with just ridiculous amounts. There's like, every minute, there's like 1,400 new blog posts. So it's something, having a content management system that makes it easier and faster and to post content helps, but it's not enough to stand out on its own. And that's what I saw too. It's like in that space, like marketing like a CMS, like platform for websites, basically competing against, giants that have like hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. You're almost competing with WordPress too. And so it's doing it, like it's been growing really well, but I saw a focus on like, well, what about the marketing? How do you actually grow the business? How do you get the traffic? And that's something I had the background from some other projects I've worked on that understand these things. And so I got together 2 other co-founders, and that was what we built Boxter. And so essentially Boxter is built on top of SimplePost. SimplePost is the technology platform behind Boxter. Boxter is just basically a B2B version of it that we're building a team around for developing new systems that actually utilize that technology stack then for creating content, doing marketing research, and then analyzing the website itself. Just to kind of basically, figure out what's going to work better. And it's all about growing web traffic and then acquiring customers. That's essentially the problem we saw, was that anyone can build anything out there nowadays. You can do an app, you can do a website. It's very easy. The problem is so can everyone else. And so how do you really grow dramatically web traffic and just bring in customers? And so that's kind of the 2 pain points, which are very tied together, that we tried to solve with Boxter. And so we now have the 4 systems, like there's Sale, which is kind of the initial one, which you saw like basically just being a way of understanding where you're at. Basically just generates reports and metrics that show where are you at, like where's the competition. That's one of the biggest things we see. Because with any company, you need to understand your value proposition, but you need to understand your competitors too. And if your competitors are doing amazing content and you're just doing mediocre content, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be as sustainable. Versus if you know exactly where your competitors are and are able to like understand that fully and see the lay of the land and then plan strategically according to those results, then that gives you a real advantage. And it's one of those things we've seen, like especially in the marketing space, where a lot of marketing they just don't understand it. There's a lot of that just kind of like just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. There's not much logic to it. And so the idea behind this system is like, what if we make it, marketing at large, just more understandable and bring it down and make sense of it so we can actually have reports that explain these things to businesses so they can understand and grow. And the next system was Boats, which is tied basically with content. Because we see that everyone knows now content is the next big thing. Content marketing is huge, content strategy. There's all these things. It's really like the hot thing now, and not everyone's know. It's still kind of like, I think, early days for these kind of things. There's all these concepts, and one of the biggest problems, though, is understanding, though, a rating of that content. the metrics for it. So what Boats does is basically just breaks down content into 5 different components for the purposes of marketing, for highly targeted content. So it's just not high quality content. It's not about good or bad content, but rather, will this content move your audience? Will this increase engagement? Will this lead to sales? And so by basically breaking it up into beautiful, just basically the design. The content needs to, better looking content is going to perform better. People in a based, in not a subjective way, based on your audience. Having an understanding of your audience and knowing what will look good to them. Is it original? And that one's common sense, but you see a lot of people just reblogging stuff where they're it's not original. What is the ratio of reposted versus actual content? And then what is the value of that? Is it something they can find somewhere else? Are you just regurgitating what everyone else is doing? Or is it really original thoughts? Is there a unique value to your content? And then accurate. Basically just, are you highly targeting your audience? You can't target everyone. You need to know exactly who you're targeting and make sure it's actually something they want to see. And then timely, essentially just being, is this relevant now? Is this something that in 2 years from now, no one's going to care about? Tech news, it's, that's a great industry but it's not something that's anyone's going to care about. You're not going to get return traffic from years. But certain industries, if you understand your audience, you can find content that will be relevant, today, as well as a year or 2 from now. And you get that long-term effects of kind of that long tail search, organic traffic. And the last is stories, which is one of the biggest things that's missing from a lot of content you see nowadays. Essentially just being, blog posts. It'd be informative. But informative just does not engage people. What engages people is an emotional connection. They need to feel. There should be something there that connects them to your content. And so by maximizing this and basically just, mapping these things out, you can tell ahead of time how content is going to perform. And so it kind of ties into a predictive analytics system, essentially, where we can do goal-based content marketing. And the next system was Dwarfs. And this is for the website itself. And the way we see websites is being the container for the content. And essentially, you just need to analyze that and see, is there some limiting factor in your website that's going to slow you down? Basically, it's like, is it discoverable? Are basic UX patterns? Gets into SEO? Can people find your content? Is it working? Are there error messages? If they come to it on a tablet, does the site work? Can they click on your menu and get to your stuff? It's little things like that you see though, but in our studying and research, we find the vast majority of websites have serious problems. Maybe it works great in one browser and one thing. It's whoever designed it just checked it in one, and they haven't done full user testing. Accessibility is another big one. Sticking with web standards and accessibility. On one hand, it's you're kind of caring about, the blind or the, people with disabilities. On the other hand, you can look at, search engine bots are essentially browsing your websites very similar to how a screen reader would. And so sticking to accessibility standards will actually boost your organic traffic because Google's going to be able to understand your content better and send more traffic to it. And then as far as responsive web design is basically the future. Every site now, it's almost required. It needs to work on every device. And you can have a mobile version of your site, but you're going to be constantly updating that and dealing with, you have 2 versions of your site. Responsive is the only way to do 1 version of your site that works on everything, and you don't have to worry about the next device coming out with a new screen resolution. It'll just fluidly adjust. And so that is hugely important. And then fast, the speed. If your site is slow, that's going to penalize your SEO, your search ranking is going to go down, but also just people are going to hit the back button. People don't have time for that. There is no time for waiting for page loads. If it takes more than a second or 2, you're going to lose a lot of traffic. Your bounce rate's going to go way up. And so a really fast site is a competitive advantage. And then shareable, just making sure that you can actually share your content. That's basically just, completes that feedback loop so that your website has all those components there, then your content will really shine through. And so it's just really a matter of making sure that none of those things are going to be slowing you down and basically optimizing it so you know what's important. It's one thing to have a really nice, beautiful website, but at the end of the day, it's the content and just making sure people actually get to it and then want to share it with people. And so in exploring this over 1 year, this is kind of the journey we did. This is, kind of my story of 1 year of marketing. Starting off, I've had a content marketing background, but not big picture marketing. It was not my strong point. And so at the beginning, I was just kind of doing sites. We were working on this, and it really had no plan. For 2 months, we were in development, we were doing things. There was no real active marketing strategy. Then in the second phase, we started playing more of a traditional marketing advertising, like pay-per-click, traditional advertising model, which works great. You can drive traffic. You can get some Google ads, you can do Facebook ads. There's ways of driving traffic. It's no problem. You just dial in, it's just going to cost you X amount. You'll have to find that out and see if it's worth it at the end of the day. But the problem is, as soon as you stop paying money for that, as soon as you stop putting effort into that, the results are just going to go back down to where they were before, because there was nothing there. You weren't really building up any value in what you were doing. And so the third stage is when we first really started testing out the Boats and Dwarfs and sales system together and developing a comprehensive content strategy based on the research of our target audience. And we saw immediate growth from the beginning. It started off like a 60% monthly growth, and ended up, mainly because of that third section there, we ended up with 6,000% growth over 1 year in web traffic. And so it's basically it works. It's one of those things like, it makes sense, and the problem is there's not really comprehensive systems out there that just gives you those actionable steps to make this happen. And that's essentially what we did, is put together stuff that we see as being just kind of the future of that sustainable growth online. The things that will be a good investment in your business. That won't just be a one-time thing that pays off, for a month or two. And that's what we start seeing with like SEO, and Facebook's big. Like the returns on a lot of these channels have just gone down. You can still get results, but the ROI is going down. You have to pay more to get the same results. And if you want more, it's going to cost even more. Versus this, with good content marketing, basically it allows you to invest long-term in your business. That the things you're doing today will pay off next week, next month, a year from now. And it'll keep building. And you can just keep building on that, and it's just about having a consistent voice and understanding what is going on with your audience. And also continuously reevaluating and improving and optimizing as you go. And we see this kind of growth happening consistently with our systems. The fourth system we developed, which was kind of the missing piece in all of this, is that's what we started to see, content marketing, those kind of things work great. You can put investment, it's an amazing long-term investment. The problem is, especially for a new site, you're going to see a delay of at least 6 months. It's just the way it is. Google usually penalizes sites, brand new sites, about 6 months as a result of all the spammers. Kind of this war back and forth has caused these kind of side effects where new sites just, it's going to take a while to build up that reputation. Unless you're really lucky and get some out of the ordinary things happen, it's a long haul. So you need to wait 6 to 12 months. And so we're looking at, well, how do we solve that problem? Is there a way to have the best of both worlds? To have something that's sped up, accelerate that progress as fast, but then also reap the long-term benefits. If you have a schedule, basically so you can dial that in was what we wanted to come up with. A system we can say, okay, we can either have this happen in 6 months or we can have it happen in 1 month. What would that take? And that takes a lot more work, honestly. It's something we're still doing a lot of development on. This one is the thing that's going to be the hardest to automate. We're having good luck automating some of the aspects of it, but some of it too is it's really about user engagement. It's something like engaging with communities, and that's something that there's not yet a computer program that does that properly. And so it's really just about, basically the system is about coming up with the guidelines and the game plan, the strategy, and then systematically figuring out what's going to get you the highest ROI. And so with that, we did a case study, which really we were hoping, we were shooting for 100, 200% monthly growth would have been nice. It ended up being 573% monthly growth in 1 month, the first month we tested it. And yeah, it worked amazingly well. Basically, the main channel we tested, with a lot of it, it's analyzing your channels, deciding where those customers are and how best to engage them. And so the number one, we picked 3. The first one was Twitter. And so with Twitter, we focused on that. We ended up having over 1,000% growth in Twitter followers and having a substantial amount of traffic from that. Number 2 was social news, which we did really well. Understanding that, it's a very complicated thing to do, to manipulate things not really manipulate, it's more just, again, it's about understanding your audience. And then once you have all the data and the research and have that game plan worked out and do some testing to figure out what actually does work and confirms those assumptions, then you can get amazing results from things like Hacker News or Reddit, everything that drives huge amounts of traffic. And it's just about knowing that audience and knowing if what you're doing appeals to them, gives them value. Because at the end of the day, that's what people want. Is if you're not getting value, then it's not going to work. You have to identify things that are really valuable, solve real problems. It's not easy. That's the thing. It takes more work to do that kind of content. And it takes more testing, and some of these things will not always go as planned. But using a systematic approach makes it as efficient as possible. And so, yeah, it leads on to kind of what we're working on now. Some of the new things is kind of a sneak peek in what we're going to be publishing soon. It's just basically a new take on lean marketing. Basically, all we're doing, which I'm a big fan of Steve Blank and Eric Ries's, the 4 steps to epiphany and the lean startup, which really has some great insight. That's the last few years that after those come out, it's really influenced a lot what I've done. And so kind of building on that and taking that approach and applying it to marketing. There's been some other people who have kind of done some things, but we found though that they're just not actionable. And basically what we're working on now is what is an actionable game plan for taking the lean startup approach and using it for marketing campaigns. So that you can just iteratively test these things. So instead of this idea that marketing should be this big expensive thing where you have this big campaign, no, start very small. So there's very little risk, and iteratively test and see what's going to work, and basically make it sustainable. Because right now, I think that is one of the biggest challenges that startups have across the world. Businesses in general, marketing is a huge problem. And it's only getting harder as there's just more and more competition out there. There's more and more things happening. Like technology is great, but it's just making it easier and easier for everyone to have available these tools. And so really it's just about having a game plan that like works. And so over time we're going to be releasing some more information kind of like detailing this based on the experiences we've had in understanding these things. And so essentially having here's a thing that anyone can follow that would get them to where they want to be by talking to customers. And that's one of the biggest things, just interacting with your customers. Having a conversation with them, like get outside the building, instead of just like thinking that something's gonna work. Instead of building the app and then hoping that they're gonna come, that almost never happens. It's like there's very few that just like hit it big. It's really about getting to your customers and like making sure and verifying every little detail as you go before investing time and effort into it. It's a costly mistake to spend tens of thousands of dollars on something that you haven't got one paying customer yet. And so that's a lot of what we're doing now, is you're not doing anything unless a paying customer. And so that's kind of with Boxter. When we started, that's a good example with Boxter. We didn't really officially start Boxter until we had a paying customer. We had ideas, we played around with some things like what Boxter would be exactly. We saw some problems and framing it, but everything we're doing with Boxter is based around, is there actual demand here? And how quantifiable is it? Like how many people are they, and how much value is that? And until you're, I often see that problem. It's like basically crossing the penny gap, they call it. The idea now, there's lots of free apps. There's lots of free things out there. And the hardest thing is to get paid, to get paid just $1 for something is much, much harder than to go from $1 to $10,000. A lot of people just expect things for free. And so it's really hard to say. If people are not paying you any money at all, it is really, really difficult to know. Because they say they love it. That's great. But as soon as you ask them to like pay me $1 for it and see what they say. I think it's important to like say, pricing's hard, but really it could be anything. I mean, I think it's at the beginning, you're not going to know what's the right pricing. I think that's a real big problem. Like basically you just want to experiment, but the big thing is just to charge something. To know, because to get that high quality feedback. Because unless you have huge amounts of funding and can just waste money, millions of dollars over many years on those kind of freemium things, then it's really hard to know. You're not going to learn as fast. Versus when you're, if you have a bootstrapped company or limited funding, then you need to figure those things out very quickly. And because the odds of something that's going to be free taking off and blowing up and being the next Tumblr or something is very, very low. It happens, but I'm much more realistic in that sense. And like, I'm a fan of bootstrapping and doing these things because it's, and Philly's a great city for it here. As I don't know if you guys, have been looking for funding for any of your projects, but it's really hard to get funding here in Philly for like risky, tech startups. And so bootstrapping is a great way to go. And there's a strong community here that's built around that. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about the stuff that's happening here at Walnut Street Labs and other co-working spaces and other just startup communities here in the region. There's a lot going on, and I think that's what we need to do is just kind of get together and have a better understanding of like how we can help each other and just grow things that are successful. Because I see like the biggest thing, like if we want more funding to happen here in Philly, if we want like make it easier to get venture capital, more easy to get angel investors, then we need more success here. And so it's about growing just large, successful companies, and the rest will kind of follow. And so we've been working with groups like Philly Startup Leaders, which is one of the best communities I think in the region that really just, it's kind of like a community of communities. It's just bringing together a lot of different people. And then out of that, I founded Philly Startup Tech, which is basically just an off-shelf group. We're like basically looking to solve tech problems because we saw that as being an issue. A lot of people were looking for technical co-founders, and that was holding up their startup because they had a technical problem they wanted to solve, and they couldn't find someone to help them solve that problem. And so we got together, and we got about 50 of us now that have a range of experience in all areas of tech, and that's basically what we're just volunteering to help the community. So anyone that has a startup problem that they want some technical help with, then we basically send it to the group, and we'll hook you up with someone that will meet with you and give you a free consultation and see like how what would be the best way to move that project forward. But through that experience, one of the big lessons we've learned, because I saw that as being a major problem, like talking to people in the community, like needing help with the technical aspects. But one of the surprises we found, one, that there's a huge amount of technical people out there that are willing to help. There really isn't, I don't think, a shortage of technical people. It's just a matter of connecting those people. And there's kind of these two different groups. There's the business people, marketing people, and there's the technical people, and they don't always intermingle. The technical people like to go to the technical events, and the business people like to go to the business events. And so in this case, we're bringing it together, but this thing we discovered, though, is that a lot of these projects, they think they have a technical problem, and when you put it in front of like 50 technical experts and analyze it, and they come back and say, no, you don't really have a technical problem. You need to take care of something else first. I think that's good. I mean, it's sometimes a hard lesson to learn, but we found like marketing and other issues tend to be more the problem. Identifying your audience, like making sure and validating your idea first before you build it. I think a lot of people get it backwards. You don't build it and then put it in front of people. You put it in front of people first. Like, do a mock-up, do a sketch on a napkin, something. Show it to someone, and then as soon as you have enough people based on the idea of you need to set that goal for how many people is it? It's going to vary, but you need to at least have someone. Have some number of people say they really want it, and that aren't your friends or just people humoring you. Get people to actually commit to something. And so, yeah, that's where we're at now. And we're basically, with Boxter, that's kind of the theme of what we're doing is we're trying to grow companies more successful, but then also, if giving back to the community, we see, so much potential here in Philly at large that, we're very committed to, helping making that happen because we see, more successful companies being something that's going to drive the community forward and make things happen. So.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. We'll do Q&A.
Yeah.
House rules, just introduce yourself, name, and short description. And I do want to, I missed this in the beginning. Igniter TV, Sean Dominski has been live streaming this to YouTube. He's been with us since the beginning, and even before the beginning. And then we also do a vignette of it. I don't know if you've seen those. This is Mike Littlemoser. And so we have similar mission. We're trying to raise the profile of innovation out here in companies. And content marketing is where it's at. You've got to tell your story on a continual basis. And I'd like to just start off by positing that sometimes I see businesses, they just get their website done. Right? They're managing that. And then to throw on content marketing, it's like, wow, that's a serious portion of their business now. But the payoff, I think, from what I've seen, what you've seen, is positive and trackable. But it's for new and growing businesses that don't get it, it's a lot to consume. So how do you convince them to invest in telling their story?
Yeah, it is a challenge. That's one of the biggest things we see with Boxter, especially because content marketing, we're kind of trying to go beyond just content marketing, but that's definitely an integral to what we're doing. And it is a relatively new thing. People just are not aware of it. The average businessman is just not, they might not even heard of content marketing or find there's definitely people, if you're on the cutting edge and you're really following the trends, then yeah, you're aware of these things, but the average person out there isn't. And so, yeah, really, the best thing is things like case studies, just really demonstrating this. And it's one of those things that over time we just kind of show those results. And I think the problem is a lot of people are, they're behind the curve essentially. It's not like 20 years ago, yeah, you just built a website and things might happen. Because it was a novelty. To have a website, back in the 90s was, there just wasn't that many. Now the problem is there are just, billions of websites. And so you need something that's going to stand out. And so that's one of the big things we see. So there's a lot of companies out there, that do websites. You go to a website company and you get a website, but then after that, nothing happens. It just sits there. And there's this idea, this, misconception that if you just have an amazing website, that somehow that will grow your business on its own. And unless it's just the most killer, cutting edge, something crazy, you're a design company that specializes in wowing people with the website, then it's not going to help your business. The average business, the website is a requirement, but it's not necessarily going to grow your business. The key is the content. That is the thing that's going to keep people coming back. It allows you to build a relationship with people. It allows you to acquire customers. It's the content. That's what they're there for. And that's the thing. You need to really, I think, and focus on the website, there needs to be more focus on the content. What the content that is there, the copy, as well as, the updating content.
All right, just got a question for Mike. Anybody doing content marketing? Neil, you talked about your team. How do you go about selling into international markets you sell consumer products?
Yeah, so I'm Neil Daftari, Vice President at Chemtech International. And this is actually really great that I'm here today just because we just started a rebranding campaign with our company hitting 30 years this month. And we do see a lot of value with content marketing, which is something that we're actually really newly just experimenting with. Over the past, 5 years, we've been doing a lot of SEO and Google click per ads. And you're right, we do see a huge increase in web traffic and people coming in. And then all of a sudden, when you limit the budget back down, because they tell you, oh, you'll stay up there, volumes tank. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're doing now is we're trying with the content marketing. And yes, a lot of our international customers are finding us through the web, through things that we post. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of it's word of mouth because we've been around for 30 years and I travel all over the world. But we're trying to take it even one step further. We feel that, yes, because we're 30 years in the business, a lot of people know us, but we still feel being a small company, that there's millions of people out there who haven't heard about us, and we're trying to look into, okay, well, how do we reach that audience now?
Yeah, and that's one of the things too with Boxter. The way we're looking at it too is like we're not trying to be like a content marketing agent or an agency really. Like we're looking at it as being like we want to work with agencies of all, like web agencies. Like we see the problem is solving the problems they have. Because like they're trying to do, they could use maybe help the content of like setting metrics for that. Like what is going to get better results. With the website, what needs to be fixed, and also just kind of understanding those things so you can make the business case for both. For why you need to have better content. Because there's a whole scale of content, and it's one of those things like we see like there's lots of people like talented writers out there that could use more work, and they're not they should be well paid, but they're not compared to other skills. They're not that expensive. Like there's definitely a strong business case for making really high quality content that is just above other things.
My name is Monique Giroux, and I'm with BombBits, which is a fundraising auction site. And about content, I think that's a really interesting question because you have to find a good writer who has the voice of the company. So if you go to just any firm that doesn't deal with what you are dealing with, you're just going to get this kind of generic blah, blah, blah. So how do you find that writer?
I think that's part of the system, and that's part of the things we like because it kind of helps solve that problem as well. Like having metrics for those things and setting those guidelines, it basically tells you the skill set of who you need and what we're in that spectrum as far as the quality and their experience. Like, the thing is, do you just need one person? You might need a whole team. I mean, to do it really properly, one of our best examples of like, something to be like off the charts, something that's like the best it gets is like the New York Times did a piece a couple of years ago called Snowfall. That was like an interactive experience. It came out of like the New York Times interactive department. And basically they had a whole team. It was like, I think 20 or 30 people. They spent several months to put this thing together. It was amazing. It was one of the first parallax designs. So as you scrolled, it had interactive elements, it had video, it had a really amazing story. They had one of the best writers ever. The thing got millions and millions of traffic. I mean, they say that the estimated cost was somewhere around $50,000 to put together this one. Essentially this is just a very awesome blog post. But a huge amount of effort went into it. But the results were impressive. Like to this day, that is probably still driving millions of traffic because it's the kind of piece that every time anyone sees it, it just really strikes them. They want to share it with everyone they know.
I read it. It was a long one. It was about these skiers who half of them got crushed by an avalanche, and there was a lot of blowback on that. It was just a glorification of these kind of cowboys, but it was compelling with the interactive piece and. So I remember where I was when I read that.
Yeah, so it won a Pulitzer Award too, which is an indication of like the level of quality.
But Nick, I was kind of smirking when you said that Brad in the back, who's on the 23 North digital team, the marketing company that is run out of here too. And I talk about content marketing a lot, and I talk about the interview process, and that I think that it's good to have someone outside the organization who will ask you questions and write it from a way that reflects more about what the audience might be looking for. When you give an assignment to somebody deep in the company, hey, write about what's going on. It ends up being way too long and way too deep. So like this third-party interview process, like a reporter, and that's where I started. I was an English major and I wanted to be in newspapers, and I was for a little while, but there was like zero money in it. But that idea of writing, asking questions, it's actually what we do with the video at the end of the start of Meetup. We kind of put you against the wall and ask you a bunch of questions, the same questions every week, we video, and then we launch it. And that's a good way to do, we found, content marketing too. You don't have to think about new questions every week. Same questions, done in the same way, and really letting this guy talk. And getting out of translating what somebody says into something. That interviews are a really great, cheap, efficient, powerful way to do content marketing.
Yeah,
We got one more question, and then we'll break. And if you want to chat with Michael, you can. I'd like to maybe see a demo of Simple Post in the future. But Ben,
You wrote a really nice article about RJ Metrics' recent growth and in relation to content marketing and the importance of it in startups. Could you kind of just elucidate us or provide that kind of anecdotal story? Not, maybe not to the full extent that you wrote, which is great. If you guys want to read about it, I encourage you to do so. But
yeah, check it out. Yeah, it's a long story overall, but it's a good example of like overnight success that took 7 years. But yeah, like the guys like Jake and Bob at RJ Metrics, they started 7 years ago, and they almost kind of stumbled into content marketing. This is like early days before, content marketing's always been around, but it was definitely before it was a buzzword. But basically, Bob was just, going around and started noticing these signs for like dating sites. He was like Collingswood, New Jersey, it'd be like collingswooddating.com. Like Princeton, he was in Princeton, like he saw it all, everywhere he went. He kept seeing these like yard signs that had these sites. And he was like, just getting curious, like, this is ridiculous. How is there a dating site for like this one little tiny town? And there's like all over the place. And he's like, are these connected in some way? And so he started researching and basically found out that yes, there's actually like, but behind all these kind of like, they kind of hid the fact behind various servers and things, but basically like there's some sleuthing and tracking down. There's actually one company behind all these sites. They had thousands and thousands of websites all across the US. And at the end of the day, the site was not about an online dating service at all. It was actually a really, really expensive offline dating service. It was essentially, questionable, like as far as business ethics. Somebody would pay like thousands of dollars and that they would like connect you with someone. And basically, figured this all out. We did a long write-up on it and put it out there, and it blew up on on Hacker News and all these social news sites. Got them national press coverage, and essentially like got them. They were at the time like struggling to get leads. They just needed leads, so they had some basic lead generation set up on the website, which is key to the content marketing. You always need some goal. The content, you need something to actually happen, a call to action, or something to happen that you can actually start that engagement, based on the content. But yeah, they basically from that one blog post generated enough leads to keep their business busy for an entire year.
And it wasn't a post that was specific to their business. It showed their analytical chops, but not really.
No, that thing it was a little bit related. I guess enough. They do like RJ Metrics. If you don't know, it does like analytics and like kind of basically business intelligence type things for business. And this was like very early days before they had even really. I think the product was very early stages, and so that's when they needed. It really was like customers, people that be interested in what they're doing, and they found that out of just, it was the millions and millions. That's what you have to be really, especially when you blow up like that. You're only get a tiny, tiny fraction, or actually get convert to customers. But when you're talking millions and millions, then it adds up.
I'd like to make note that Bob, what's his last name? From Moore. He's a columnist on the New York Times. He's a really awesome writer. So I'm sure that ended up leading him there,
That
right?
helped, yeah.
So kind of be interesting is probably the first mandate of content marketing. Okay, well, let's give Mike Riley a round of applause. I'll put the music back on, relax, and drink more coffee.